The sand has worked its way into every wound. Nefertari is 24 years old, and she can feel the grains grinding against the raw places where the ropes have stripped her wrists. Can taste blood and dust on her cracked lips, can smell her own fear mixing with the animal stink of the donkeys that have dragged her cart for 11 days across the desert. She was until 16 days ago the wife of Amenhotep, chief scribe of the temple of Ammon at Thebes. A woman who wore linen so fine it was nearly transparent, who ate from plates of fence, who had servants to oil her skin and braid her hair with beads of gold. Now she kneels in a wooden cage on wheels, her shaved head burning under the sun of Upper Egypt, her body covered in a shift so rough it raises welts wherever it touches skin. The shift is deliberate. She was told that when she arrived at her destination, too fine would suggest she retained some status. Too poor would suggest she was not worth the journey. This roughness, this specific grade of discomfort, marked her as what the court had declared her to be. Given the word had been spoken by the magistrate without emphasis, without cruelty, without any apparent awareness that he was ending her life while leaving her alive. Her husband, Amenhotep, had been accused of stealing from the temple treasury. The evidence was fabricated. She knew this. The priests knew this. Everyone knew this. But Amenhotep's rival, Userhat, had powerful friends, and powerful friends meant that evidence did not need to be real to be effective. Amenhotep was sentenced to the copper mines, where men rarely survived more than 2 years. She was sentenced to something else, something the legal codes described in language so clinical that she had not understood at first, what it meant given to the soldiers of the garrison at Buhan. She had asked the magistrate to clarify. She had asked him to explain what given meant in practical terms, what her status would be, what rights she would retain. The magistrate had looked at her with something that might have been pity, or might have been contempt, or might have been nothing at all. "You will have no status," he said. "You will retain no rights. You will be communal property of the garrison. Every soldier from the commander to the lowest conscript will have equal claim to your person. You will serve the garrison until you are released or until you die, whichever comes first." Now, 11 days into the journey that will take her to the southern frontier of Egypt, to a fortress on the edge of Nubian territory, where 300 soldiers live in isolation from everything they knew. She's beginning to understand what those words actually meant. The cart stops. Men approach soldiers from the escort, their faces wrapped against the blowing sand, their eyes evaluating her through the gaps in the cloth. They have been evaluating her since the journey began, calculating, assessing, discussing in low voices what will happen when they reach Buhan. And she is officially transferred to garrison command. This is not random cruelty. She is beginning to understand. This is system. This is a punishment that Egypt has refined over centuries. A method of destroying a woman without the mess of execution. A way of making someone disappear from respectable society while technically remaining alive. The garrison at Buhan has received women before. The soldiers know what to do with them. The commanders know how to manage them. There are procedures, protocols, a bureaucracy of degradation that makes the process efficient and the outcomes predictable. One of the soldiers unlocks her cage and drags her out into the burning sand. He pushes a water skin toward her mouth, not from kindness but from practicality. She is cargo. Damaged cargo is less valuable than intact cargo. He is maintaining the merchandise. 3 more days, he says. Then you belong to Buhan. Belong. Another word that carries weight she is only beginning to understand. She drinks the water and memorizes the soldier's face. She memorizes the positions of the guards, the arrangement of the supplies, the direction of the sun, the distance they have traveled. She does not know yet what she will do with this information. But information is the only thing they cannot take from her, and she intends to gather as much of it as possible before she arrives at the place where she will cease to be a person and become something else entirely. What you are about to learn has been systematically excluded from the popular narratives that celebrate ancient Egypt as a civilization of pyramids and pharaohs, of golden treasures and mystical wisdom. The scholars who marvel at Egyptian art and architecture have chosen not to examine too closely what that civilization did to those who fell outside its protections. The documentaries that celebrate Cleopatra and Nefertiti prefer not to mention the women whose names were erased, whose bodies were given away, whose destruction was so complete that they left almost no trace in the historical record. Tonight, you will learn about the punishment the Egyptians called giving to the soldiers. Not execution, which would have been quick, not slavery, which at least provided clear legal status, but something worse than either. A dissolution of personhood so complete that the woman who endured it ceased to exist in any meaningful sense, while her body continued to function, continued to be used, continued to serve purposes that the legal codes described only in euphemisms. You will learn why this punishment was reserved for specific crimes, particularly crimes that embarrassed powerful men or threatened the stability of religious institutions. You will learn about the frontier garrisons where these women were sent, isolated outposts where 300 soldiers lived for years without leave, without families, without access to the women of respectable society. You will learn what happened in those garrisons, not in graphic detail, but in the systematic reality that the sources preserve. You will learn about the women who survived because some did survive, emerging after years of garrison service into a world that did not know what they had endured, that had no framework for understanding what had been done to them. You will learn what happened to these survivors, how they rebuilt lives from fragments, how some chose silence and some chose testimony, how the stories that survived were almost always filtered through male scribes who had their own reasons for recording or concealing. You will learn why Egyptian sources describe this punishment so rarely, why the legal codes that authorize it use language so vague that scholars have debated for decades what it actually meant. You will learn that the vagueness was deliberate, that the punishment was designed to be unspeakable in the literal sense, something that respectable Egyptians did not speak about directly because speaking about it would acknowledge realities they preferred to ignore. Subscribe if you want to understand the darkness beneath Egypt's golden surface. Comment below telling me where you are watching from. Because Nefertari is 3 days away from Buhan, 3 days away from becoming communal property of 300 soldiers, 3 days away from discovering what given actually means. And I am going to tell you exactly what she experienced. But before I reveal what happened to Nefertari in that garrison, before I explain the system that processed her and the years that changed her, I need to take you back. I need to show you how Egyptian justice functioned, why this punishment existed, and what made it worse than the alternatives that seem more obviously terrible. Because you cannot understand what Nefertari endured without understanding the logic that created her fate. Egyptian justice was not designed to be fair. It was designed to maintain order, protect the powerful, and make examples of those who threatened a stability that allowed civilization to function along the narrow strip of fertile land bordering the Nile. The legal system had developed over nearly 0 years by the time Nefertari's sentence was pronounced. It was sophisticated, bureaucratic, documented in records that allow modern scholars to reconstruct its operations in considerable detail. Egyptians believed in Mahat, the cosmic principle of order and justice, and they believed that their legal system embodied this principle, that the punishments they imposed were not merely practical, but cosmically appropriate. This belief allowed them to impose punishments of extraordinary cruelty while maintaining absolute certainty that they were acting righteously. The punishment system was graduated according to the severity of the offense and the status of the offender. Minor crimes might result in beatings, fines, or forced labor. More serious crimes could lead to mutilation, the cutting off of ears, nose, or hands, or to the copper mines, where conditions were so brutal that sentences of more than 2 years were effectively death sentences. The most serious crimes against the state or the gods warranted execution, sometimes by impalement, sometimes by being thrown to the crocodiles, sometimes by being burned alive, but there were also crimes that occupied a peculiar middle ground. Crimes that were serious enough to require severe punishment, but that involved circumstances making standard punishments inappropriate. Crimes where the guilty party was a man of some status, but his wife was also implicated, even if only by association. Crimes where making an example required punishment that would be visible and memorable without requiring the expense and ritual pollution of execution. For these crimes, the punishment of giving was available. The practice appears to have originated in the military context. Frontier garrisons, isolated for years at a time, posed specific problems for military discipline. Soldiers who served at places like Buin or Elephantine were far from their families, far from the women of their communities, far from any acceptable outlet for desires that Egyptian culture normally channeled through marriage and concubinage. Left entirely without sexual access, these soldiers became restless, violent, prone to the kind of disorder that threatened military effectiveness. The solution that emerged was pragmatic in the way that military solutions often are. Certain women, criminals, prisoners of war, sometimes slaves who had offended their owners, were assigned to garrison use. They belonged to no individual soldier. They were communal property available to any man who wanted them, maintained by the garrison command as a collective resource. This system served multiple purposes. It provided an outlet for soldiers' desires, reducing the tensions that might otherwise explode into violence against each other or against the local population. It created a punishment for women that was worse than death, while avoiding the religious complications of execution. It made examples of women whose crimes or whose husbands' crimes required visible consequences without requiring visible bodies. The women who were given to garrisons occupied a legal status unlike anything else in Egyptian society. They were not slaves because slaves had owners who bore responsibility for them. They were not prisoners because prisoners were held for specific terms and then released. They were not even property in the normal sense because property could be bought, sold, inherited, and protected. They were in the legal terminology that survives simply given. The word suggests transfer, suggests that something has changed hands, but it does not specify to whom or for what purpose. The vagueness was intentional. Everyone knew what given meant. No one wanted to specify it directly. Now let us return to Nefertari, who has arrived at the fortress of Buin after 14 days of travel through the desert. The fortress is larger than she expected. Stone walls rise 40 ft from the sand, crenellated and watchtowered, designed to withstand siege by Nubian armies that have tested Egyptian power for generations. Inside the walls, she can see barracks, storehouses, a small temple, the administrative buildings where garrison command manages the complex logistics of keeping 300 men alive and functional on the edge of hostile territory. The escort hands her over to a garrison officer who examines documents, makes notes on a tablet, and gestures for her to be taken to a building near the western wall. She memorizes the path, the positions of the guards, the lay out of the fortress as she is led through streets that fall silent when she passes. The soldiers know what she is. They have seen women like her before. The building near the western wall is small, perhaps 20 ft by 30, divided into a main room and a smaller chamber at the back. The main room contains bedding of a sort, rough mats arranged along the walls, blankets that have seen better decades, a few wooden stools. The smaller chamber contains a latrine pit and a basin for washing. The walls are mud brick, the floor packed earth, the ceiling low enough that a tall man would have to duck. A woman emerges from the shadows of the main room. She is perhaps 35, her face weathered, her body bearing marks that Nefertari recognizes from the injuries she herself sustained during transport. But her eyes are what hold Nefertari's attention. They are flat, empty, the eyes of someone who has seen everything and retreated to a place where nothing can reach her. "I am Hanat Mahit," the woman says. "I have been here for 6 years. I will explain how things work." "How many of us are there?" "3. Now that you have arrived, there were 4 until last month. Situ died. Fever. The commander said it was not fever. Nefertari absorbs this information. 3 women for 300 soldiers. The mathematics of what this implies is staggering. How do we survive? She asks. Hanat its expression does not change. Most of us do not. The average is 2 years. I have survived 6 because I learned things that the others did not learn. I will teach you if you are capable of learning. What things, which soldiers are dangerous and which are merely brutal, which officers have enough authority to provide protection in exchange for exclusivity. How to maintain your health when everything in this place is designed to destroy it. How to remain yourself inside when everything outside is trying to erase you. She gestures toward one of the mats. Rest now. Tonight, the commander will summon you. He claims first access to all new arrivals. After that, you will be made available to the garrison. The first week is the worst. If you survive the first week, you have a chance of surviving longer. Nefertari sits on the mat. She has been assigned. The rough fabric scratches against her legs, already raw from the journey. She can hear sounds from outside soldiers calling to each other, the clatter of equipment, the ordinary noises of military life that will be the backdrop to her existence for however long she lasts. What happened to you? She asks Hatmahit. What was your crime? My husband was a priest who objected to the wrong policy. He was sent to the mines. I was sent here. She pauses. He died in the first year. I learned about it from a supply officer who thought the information might make me more cooperative. Did it? No. Nothing makes us more cooperative. Nothing makes any of this acceptable. But we learn to endure because the alternative is to die. And dying is easy here. Living is hard. I have chosen hard. She retreats to her own mat, leaving Nefertari alone with questions she does not yet know how to ask. The commander's name was Kasset, and he was not what Nefertari expected. He was perhaps 50 years old, with the bearing of a career soldier, and the tired eyes of a man who had spent too many years in places he did not want to be. His quarters were austere by the standards of Egyptian officers, functional furniture, no decorations beyond a small shrine to Amun, none of the luxuries that men of his rank typically accumulated. He sat behind a table covered with documents and watched her approach with an expression she could not read. Sit, he said, gesturing to a stool across the table from him. She sat. The stool was low enough that she had to look up at him, a deliberate arrangement that reinforced the power differential between them. But his tone was not harsh, and his eyes, when they met hers, held something other than the predatory calculation she had seen in other men since her sentencing. You are Nefertari, wife of Amenhotep, formerly chief scribe of the Temple of Amun. I am. Your husband was convicted of theft from the temple treasury. The evidence suggests he was framed by a rival named User-Hat, who had connections to the high priest's faction. Your husband was sent to the copper mines. You were sent here. She had not expected him to know the details of her case. She had not expected him to mention that Amenhotep was framed to acknowledge what everyone knew, but no one admitted. You seem well informed, she said. I make it my business to know who is sent to my garrison and why. It helps me understand what I am dealing with. He leaned back in his chair. I also make it my business to understand the political currents and thieves. User-Hat is a dangerous man. He destroyed your husband to eliminate a rival, and he destroyed you to ensure that no one with knowledge of your husband's innocence would remain in a position to cause trouble. If you know he was innocent, why does that change nothing? Because justice and truth are different things. Justice is what the courts declare. Truth is what actually happened. Egypt runs on justice, not truth. I have learned this over 30 years of service. He rose from the table and moved to a cabinet where he poured wine into 2 cups. He handed one to her, a gesture so unexpected that she almost dropped it. You are now communal property of this garrison. He said the legal codes are clear about what that means. You have no status, no rights, no protections beyond what I choose to provide. Every soldier in this fortress, from my officers to the lowest conscript, has equal claim to your person. I understand. I do not think you do. Not yet. He sat back down, his wine untouched. There are 300 soldiers in this garrison. Most of them have been here for years with no leave, no families, no access to women outside of those assigned to communal use. They are not evil men, most of them, but they are men under conditions that erode the restraints that civilization normally imposes. What happens to you here will not be the result of particular cruelty. It will be the result of system of numbers of what 300 men without other outlets will do when a woman is made available to them. Then why tell me this? Why give me wine and explain my situation as if I were a person rather than cargo? Kmart was silent for a long moment before answering. Because I am tired, he said, finally tired of this posting, tired of this system, tired of pretending that what happens here is justice rather than organized brutality. I have commanded this garrison for 12 years. I have watched 11 women arrive in your position. 3 survived to be released, 8 died. I could not save any of them. Perhaps I cannot save you either. But I can at least acknowledge that you are a person being fed into a machine rather than pretending that the machine is righteous. What happened to the 3 who survived? They were released when the terms of their sentences ended or when political circumstances changed enough that their continued punishment became inconvenient. They returned to Egypt. I do not know what became of them afterward. How long is my sentence? Your sentence has no term. You are given to this garrison until you are released or until you die. Release requires a petition to the authorities and thieves, which requires someone with influence to file it. Since User Hat has influence and you have none, I would not expect release unless circumstances change significantly. Nefertari absorbed this information. No fixed term, no expectation of release, only endurance until death, or until something changed that she could not predict or control. You said you cannot save me, she said, but you also said some women survived. What made them different? Quasat looked at her with something that might have been approval. They found purposes, he said. Reasons to continue that went beyond mere biological persistence. They built strategies for managing what happened to them. They created alliances with me, with other women, sometimes with soldiers who were less brutal than average and could be cultivated as protectors. Will you protect me? I will do what I can within the limits of my position. I am commander of this garrison, but I am also subject to regulations and expectations that I cannot openly violate. I can claim first access to new arrivals.